Okay, next, let's keep in mind that we have LFO modulation, and that is basically allowing you to use the LFO and its various waveforms to create modulation in the pitch of VCO. And it's interesting, Yamaha has done a little artful editing in your application here, in the sense that we're turning up the amount of modulation, but it's limited because, you know, we're starting to hear that vibrato, and as we turn the LFO up, the effect becomes more intensified, but it doesn't go to something like a huge sweep of the oscillator between the, you know, the height and the depth of the wave. They basically said, oh, you probably wouldn't ever want more modulation than this, because I think it's the last point at which you're holding on to any sort of tonality. And they probably very logically said, well, you don't want to make it into some kind of crazy noise, but as synthesis, we actually do want to make it into a crazy noise. But that is the limit of your LFO modulation of the oscillator. But that's not a disaster. You can still get great effect with that amount. Of course, right here in the oscillator, we also have Portamento. So this is where you would control your Portamento. And the L and the S stand for long and short, and I guess we do have a decent length of Portamento here. So that's where your Portamento would come in. And that is awesome. Also, we have pulse width modulation. We don't have the ability to basically set the... we don't have the ability to set the pulse width. It's going to be a square wave no matter what. Our pulse is always a square. But we do have the ability to modulate that square with the LFO. So let's have a listen to that. Let's go into the square. And they've also made the choice here not to allow the pulse width modulation to go into 100% or 0%, which would make the sound drop out, as you may have experienced in various synthesizers. The people at Yamaha decided that you just wanted this as basically a chorusing effect, and it does not drop out by getting to a width that is either everything or nothing. And of course, the speed is controlled by the LFO. Let's bring in the sawtooth and see how that affects the pulse width modulation. Of course, since it is a sawtooth, there isn't pulse width modulation, although there are sometimes you can find synths that will do a sort of variation on a sawtooth. This is not one, but it does affect how your pulse width modulation on the square sounds due to the presence of the sawtooth. I keep on, this is hilarious. I keep on hearing myself playing weirdly. And I don't know if you've noticed too, but like what I'm playing isn't really working out. And here's why. This is high note priority. And I typically play low note priority synthesizers. So every time I am pressing a note that is lower than the note that I'm playing, I expect it to play because I typically play, for example, Moog synthesizers, low note priority. But this is high note priority. So like whenever I go down, I'm not getting anything, and I keep on going, oh, what's going on there? And then I adjust, which is interesting. But no, this is high note. Which is cool. Okay, so that is our pulse width modulation. So, yeah, there is a fair amount of control of your single oscillator here. Of course, these outcomes don't lead to us having the ability to be super crazy and come up with, we're all used to Eurorack right now in modular synthesis. So like when we're faced with a single oscillator with these sort of not only limited control count, but controls with limitations like the LFO mod limitation and the pulse width modulation limitation, it can kind of indicate that we're talking about a synthesizer that was designed for musical performance and less so for actual synthesis. So this is a synthesizer for the synthesizer timbre to be played traditionally, more so than a sound design machine. And that is a truth that people don't typically really seem to talk about very much, but that's what we're looking at with this synthesizer. So if you're looking for something to play cool melodies in, vintage analog timbres, then you're set. If you're looking to do, complex synthesis, or even in some cases basic synthesis, this is not your guy. But it's a great sounding synth. For example, as you may have noticed, because the LFO mod and the pulse width modulation both are depending on the LFO, we're stuck. We can't have a different LFO setting for the pulse width modulation and the LFO mod. So when you turn one up, you're going to get what the other one's set to. Which is sad because we typically want an LFO mod to be faster, and we typically want a pulse width mod to be slower. So we're working at cross purposes there. That is the sad thing about this VCO. Anyway, this has been the VCO present on the Yamaha. I'm sorry. This has been the VCO present on the Yamaha CS-5.